Hey there, it's Renessa Boley Layne, and I want to welcome you to another conversation on creating your perfect work. We are in the middle of our Love and Work Summit. So if you have missed any part of this interview series, definitely go back and catch up because whether you are married, dating, coupled up, craving love, running as far away from love as you possibly can, there is something in this series for you. And so in today's conversation, we're going to talk about men, women, and conflict
Mm,
and particularly conflict in love relationships. You
mm,
know, I'm a firm believer that how we navigate conflict will often determine whether the relationship survives or not.
mm.
And just because you're quote unquote together doesn't mean that the relationship is surviving. And so today's guest will actually help us to fight more fairly, or better yet, not fight at all. Instead, we're being invited to really leverage conflict to create stronger bonds with the person that we love. And so, this powerful man who is sharing the screen with me today is none other than Dr. Clarence Shuler. Dr. Shuler is the president of Building Lasting Relationships. He and his wife, Brenda, have been married for over 37 years, which is all I need to know. It's all we can full stop. I need to talk to you. so, but they conduct marriage, men's, women's, and single seminars all around the world. In January 2020, both Brenda and Clarence received Family Life's Weekend to Remember Marriage Getaway Speakers of the Year Award, which really says something about the value that they bring to audiences as they help to transform people's relationships. Clarence speaks to youth, to college students, singles about friendship, dating, biblical sex, pornography, sexting, all the things. He is an author of well over 10 books. And something else that I wanted to mention that I had forgotten. But I know that he also does a lot of work with Dr. Gary Chapman, right?
Yeah.
Who is the best-selling author of the book, The Five Love Languages, which many of us have heard. And together, he and Dr. Chapman do a lot of date night work and cross-cultural friendship work, and really just helping people to build amazing relationships across the board. Busy guy, always on the go. But what I really, really appreciate about Dr. Shula is that he's salt of the earth. He's as real and relatable as they get. He is so common sense. He brings what can be really convoluted experiences to navigate. Human dynamics can be really hard to navigate, but he makes it so simple. And you're going to learn a lot from him. And so I'm really excited to have him on the show. And with that, I just want to welcome you, Dr. Clarence. I done called you
Wow.
everything, Dr.
You
Shula,
did, you did,
Clarence.
you did. Yeah, yeah. Clarence, whoever works, some call me Dr. C, some Reverend C,
Dr.
whatever.
Love.
Clarence, yeah, they call me Love Doctor. I do make house calls, but Renessa, thanks so much for that introduction. That was really pretty amazing, and thank you for your friendship.
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, the thing about conflict, disagreements and conflicts, they are such a normal part of human dynamics, right? But why is unresolved conflict and strife so detrimental to relationships?
Well, very few people want conflict. In
Hmm.
fact, some people will do anything to avoid conflict.
Yep.
So when you have prolonged conflict or strife, which is really a more intense conflict,
Yeah.
um, it impacts everything you do. And you
Yeah.
don't want that so that eats on your head. You're trying to figure every free moment when you're not working or taking care of kids, if you have kids, how can we resolve this? And then there's a whole issue of winning and losing, which is a
Yeah.
totally the worst thing you think about dealing with conflict. Conflict really is not a bad thing, but how we handle conflict is critical. Conflict is simply means that two people and a man and woman, we typically think differently, not
Mhm.
one superior and inferior, but we process information differently. So conflict is a very natural thing. And the goal of conflict is not winning per se, it's understanding.
Okay.
And usually when we can understand, understanding usually eliminates frustration, anger, all those different things. Because when Brenda and I have conflict and she shares why she did it, I go, oh, that's why you did that.
Hmm.
And it may not make sense to me, but I'm not her. I have to let her be her. And I might say this to her, or she might say it to me when we're working through conflict. I never would have done it that way, which is fine. And so it's not about blame, it's understanding. And most of the time when we have understanding, that can lead us to agreement. But understanding and agreement, two different issues. So that's part of the problem. And so when we have this prolonged conflict, it interferes with our intimacy, not so much sexually, but our closeness, our ability to talk. And then if one of us feels wounded by the other person, then sometimes we want to get even or we want justice. And it creates all kinds of stuff.
Justice.
Yes, yes. So and then some people, they have to prove they're right. And then, and that can be a big issue, as opposed to saying, hey, I was wrong, or hey, I didn't understand. Tell me more about this. And here's the deal. When there's a problem with one spouse or someone you're dating, if you're not married, then you both have a problem if you're trying to be a couple. And so the issue is, how do we resolve this as a couple? Not who's right or wrong, what's best for us as a couple, which may mean every now and then the individual may have to sacrifice for the good of the couple.
Interesting. When you talk about understanding, I think there takes a fair amount of, I don't know if humility is the word, but I can't think of a better one, so I'll use that. But I think it takes a fair amount of humility to be able to understand someone's perspective, even if you don't agree with it, right? I might not have done it that way, but I understand why you did it that way, because it takes away the judgment, right? So just because I hear you, no, I was dumb. Why would you do it that way, right? There's a difference in being able to be like, okay, I now understand why. There's validation in that, even if that's not the way I would have approached it. And I do think there's a fair amount of humility that's required to be able to see it that way. But you've seen it a whole lot more than I have. So help me understand kind of that nuance there.
Well, I like that word humility. I would also use the word maturity.
Yes, that's a better word. Yeah.
That, okay, we have a problem. Okay, Brenda's upset with me. The first thing I need to try and figure out, okay, what did I do? Or I just come to her and say, hey, from my perspective, you seem to be upset with me. Did I do something that upset you? And that way she's not on the defensive. I'm not upset. I'm coming to her saying, hey, or she might come to me and say, you were kind of short with me. What's going on? And I said, well, and then we're for everybody, but we're brutally honest. So we never go to bed with guesswork if she's mad or I'm mad or whatever. But it's a whole idea that we're a couple and we want to enjoy each other, not fight with each other. Now, we're both strong-willed, we're both stubborn, so we can have great fights. And, I can go days without talking. Now, she can't, but I can go days without talking. So, but that does not, improve the relationship.
Yeah.
And then since we're people of faith, to me, she's a gift. And so how I treat her is reflecting how I care about the giver.
Yeah.
So all that's really tied to relationship. So, and being married 37 years, almost 38 years, you learn to have that humility. You learn to say, hey, it's not about me being right. It's not about winning. It's about, hey, this is the person I love. This person I'm committed to. This is the mother of our kids. So let's make this work, because we have much more fun together when we're laughing than when we're not talking with each other.
Yeah.
And it impacts our kids if you have kids. And when they were in the house, it would impact them too. So all that's really important. So you really want your spouse's best interest at heart, and part as helping her or him to come out and communicate what's really going on with them. And the way we're socialized, we as guys are socialized not to talk and share our emotions. But then we get into a relationship, our spouses or our girlfriends want to just flip a switch and we tell everything. So that can be new for us. That can be threatening for us. And so that's why it's important also, I think, for spouses to, or girlfriends, whatever, to create a safe place for the guy. It's not demeaning the woman or making her less than, but women tend to be more expert at talking about their emotions and sharing their emotions than we are. And so we have to kind of learn to have that safe place. So if she can create a safe place for us, then that shows us how to eventually create a safe place for her so she can talk to us about any and everything.
Interesting. So a couple words that kind of got anchored for me. What makes conversation or talking about how you feel or whatever, why is that sometimes threatening to a masculine man? And what makes, like, how can a woman make it safe for a man to communicate?
Okay, great questions. Because we as men, most men, not all men,
Mm,
aren't used to sharing our emotions until we're
mhm,
actually into a relationship.
mhm,
Well, women typically do that almost as soon as they come out of the womb. They're
mhm,
playing, they're doing this, they're sharing this stuff, they're talking about that. And so it's new for us. So for us as guys, when it's new, we're not sure about the territory. And then we're also trying to figure out what it is to be head of the house, wherever that is. Or if
mhm,
you become a person of faith, a servant leader. So that's new. Um, and then I think to share, to become vulnerable, to share, hey, this is, am I still being masculine and sharing my weakness?
got
You
it.
know, and really understanding that sharing my weakness is not really making me weak, is actually making me strong. And
Okay.
the other thing is that if I'm with my spouse or my girlfriend, whatever, then allowing her to use her strengths or her giftedness, whatever, to help me in my time of need, because I need to be able to do the same thing for her. So,
Mhm,
so it's really, it's almost counterculture. It's that,
mhm.
hey, it's okay to share this. And so also we have filters. When Brenda says we need to talk, as a male, I'm hearing,
Oh
okay,
boy.
I did something wrong.
Mhm,
It's something, okay, what did I do wrong? And so, but so it's just a different
yeah.
mindset. Most women, not all women, according to Dr. Tannen, a female former professor at University of Georgetown, um, she said the average woman wants to talk about your relationship maybe 45 minutes to an hour every day, on average. The average guy, we want to talk about your relationship maybe once every 2 weeks and only about 10, 15 minutes if we think something's broken. So it's just a different, neither one's right or wrong, it's just different. And
Mhm,
so we have to make those adjustments to make our marriage better and,
okay.
and or our dating relationship better.
Got it. And so then as a woman, again, and we're talking about feminine energy and we're talking about masculine energy. There's some women who skew more masculine, so emotions is
Yeah.
not their strong suit, and there's some
Right.
men. So we get that. So we're talking a little bit in generalities, and we recognize
Right.
that. But how can a woman create that safe space
Well, I think
for a man?
well, I think she doesn't have to agree with him, but I think whenever he first shares what's going on with him, whether she agrees or not, that she just hears it. And so he
Okay.
feels hurt. And
Okay.
so she may say, thank you for sharing it with me. I appreciate you sharing it with me. I appreciate you trusting me enough to share it with me. Some
Hmm.
way that you're reaffirming him communicating, but it
Hmm.
doesn't mean you're necessarily affirming what he's doing or what he said.
Okay.
And so if you disagree with that, I wouldn't come out right away and say, I wouldn't have done it that way. I
That
might
don't
wait.
make no sense.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
And
effective.
with that same accent, yeah. Um, because that could emasculate him. And they say, okay,
Okay.
I'm gonna be my boys now. And
Okay.
so I think maybe wait an hour or two or something like that after he's communicating, come back and say, honey, when you shared that with me, he said, yeah, and I appreciate you sharing it with me. So I've been thinking about that a little bit. Hey, from my perspective, I thought I might have done it this way, or from my perspective, blah, 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 blah. And then
Mhm.
he's okay because he's already felt heard.
Okay.
A couple hours have gone bad. He hadn't been rejected. He hadn't been
Okay.
so he hadn't been made to feel wrong. But now you can come back an hour or two later and say, hey, I've been thinking about that, which means, hey, I heard you.
Okay.
And so now it's a safe place. I can share my emotions without immediately being rejected or put down or made to feel stupid.
Okay.
And when guys feel like that, they're going to start talking less to their significant other, and they're going to be with their guys, even though they much rather be with you. Because to their
Okay.
guys, it's a safe place. Even though with you, they want to be with you, it's not a safe place. So that's
Okay.
that's one real simple way you can do that. And it becomes a win-win for everybody.
Okay. So not necessarily, so don't just come out the gate with
Right.
whatever perspective you have. Because I think for women, there's this well, you're talking now, so we may as well, like, I got to get you while I got you. Let's get this thing settled. Talking about coming back 2 hours later, you might not be, you might run. And so we got this open opportunity here. I got a point to make. And so you're saying that's not effective.
Typically not, and until he's used to that being a safe place. Now, because now in most couples, you have one person who deal with the issue right away. Let's deal with it right away.
Yeah.
And then you have one person, I need time to process this. I need to get all the information. I need to make sure I'm heard, make sure you hear what I'm saying. And so sometimes we call the speaker listener technique. And what we do with that is that you allow one of you has the floor and something tangible. And it's symbolic of that. You get to share what's going on with you, but you keep it short. You share maybe 2 or 3 statements. Hey, in our relationship, the reason I've guys talking right now because I'm struggling with blah, 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 blah. And you give the person the other time to paraphrase so they can say, am I hearing you say this? Which seems very elementary, but it's really important. And so important. And so instead of saying that's what you said, well, that's not what I meant, and have that kind of argument, they can say, hey, am I hearing you say this? Because this is what I thought I heard you say. They said, no, that's not what I meant. This is what I meant. And so you're not having literal against essence in your conflict. Again, you're trying to get understanding. But they only share 3 statements. The other person gets to sort of paraphrase that in their own words to make sure they're being heard. And then they give the floor to the other person, and the person can respond to that. And so what happens is in that process, there's less emotion involved and you look more objective and you're really trying to hear what the other person has to say. You're not trying to come back at them or reload. You're trying to hear what they're trying to say. And that really helps you get to the real issue of communication.
Got it. I can see that. I can certainly appreciate the understanding aspect, because once you understand that the other person is not intending to attack you, whether it is, the female's not looking to attack or vice versa, then it changes the energy of the conversation. Because I think oftentimes there's this automatic guard that says, what did I do wrong? You're about to make me wrong. There's about to be some judgment, something about to pop off. And you're already set. And that's not the way that conflict can work out successfully. But I think that there's when you get that understanding, it becomes, okay, I'm still loved, I'm still affirmed, I'm still all of these things. Especially for women, there's an importance there about being able to feel that way. Sweet thing. So for those of y'all who are listening in, I have a sick child who is staying home, and we've been cleaning up vomit and all the things that mothers do, but the show must go on. And so if you see little puff balls popping up every now and again on the bottom, she's on the floor coloring and making noise. So let's just put that out there as we continue the conversation, and I might have her pop up and officially say hi, but that's where we are. So help me understand this. How should we view strife and conflict? And obviously, yes, strife is a much stronger form of conflict. So let's talk about strife, like this excessive conflict that's happening in a marriage. Like, how should we view that? And how should we view it if we're dating? Like in the dating space, is that a red flag? Like how we perceive it might differ depending on the nature of the relationship. Well,
strife, as I looked it up, it can be very intense. It can even be physical. It's definitely a yellow flag. If you're dating, as a female, I would just really be careful, because what's causing the strife, how does it get resolved, and if it's not getting resolved, it keeps coming back up. And so, and then there's a safety issue, and then what's the real issue, and then this, and a lot of times when people have this intense strife, of a male does, it can often be the fact that he has not had a male mentor or father or stepfather, because most guys who have a stepfather understand authority and they understand relationships better, and they really are better equipped to be in a relationship with a female. Now, when guys get frustrated because if the female can out-articulate the guy, he can't intellectually hang with her to some extent, then the natural thing for most guys, which doesn't make it right, the default is to physically intimidate so I can win this conflict because I go into conflict thinking I've got to win.
Okay.
So I think it's really important that it's good she sees that. But
Mhm.
then I would think at that point, if the relationship is getting really serious, then I would really try and get some counseling and say,
Okay.
hey, what's causing this strife? Is it ever getting resolved? If not, because what they're doing before marriage, they would tend to take into marriage.
Okay.
And so, and most women, not all women, have this nesting gene. And so they want to make the relationship work. And a lot of times when I feel a relationship's not working, they typically feel it's their fault. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, women who've been physically abused would tend to feel it's my fault. I did something wrong. That's why he hit me. And they would stay in a relationship because they really want to make the relationship work. And so if it's happening in a dating relationship, in a sense, that's really great because it's before you really made a
Yeah.
commitment. And you need to have some goals in your dating relationship. You need to have some deal breakers.
Mhm.
Some things what I need to do to walk away. But if
Mhm.
you can get him talking about that and working through that, that's
Mhm.
really important. And it's not just he repents later and say, I'm really sorry. A
Yeah.
lot of guys do that, but there needs to be some significant change. And probably I would really, if they would come to me for counseling, if they both were coming, I would say you need to slow down in a
Mhm.
relationship. I would say you need to, if you're getting married in 3 months, 6 months, I say, you probably don't want to hear this. I know the invitation may have already gone out. We need to kick, we need to kick this back for
Conversation's
a year.
already gone.
Yeah, I say, you kick this back for a year. Don't let money interfere with what could be a really great relationship, or really that you're both good people, but y'all not a good fit for each other.
Yeah.
That would be, my suggestion. So, what are the triggers? Uh, is it ever getting resolved?
Mhm.
If it continues to have strife, is it a new thing? So
Mhm.
is it that, and is it with you or is it with
Mhm.
work or whatever? So those are things we have to really process. Those questions that have to really be asked and answered.
Mhm. Got it. Got it. And so then when you're in relationship, like committed relationship, marriage, blah, 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 and you've got excessive conflict. Let's say excessive conflict. Let's assume it's not, physical abuse and all that.
Okay. Okay.
That's a
Right.
very different beast, different
Yes.
level of urgency. But let's
Yeah.
say you've got excessive conflict, unresolved. How do you view that in marriage? Do you just view it as a skill set issue? Do you view it as a man, I chose the wrong one issue? Like, how do you begin to think about that?
Well, if they would come to me for counseling, I would ask, what was your dating experience like? What was it like the first year of marriage or
Mhm.
so? What was
Mhm.
that like? And if it was radically different, which is why you got married, what has occurred to why it is the way it is now? What has
Mhm.
happened? How do you guys handle conflict? Do you yell at each other? Do you sit down? Uh, are you heard? Excessive? Are you throwing things? What's happening now that is always all the time? Because it could be woundedness, it could be feel like I'm not being heard, and then we go to the extremes and say he always, or she never, and that's a gross exaggeration when we say always or never. But what they're saying when they say that is I've been severely wounded and have not been healed. And so,
Mhm.
so your spouse, so a spouse, when if Brenda would say you always or never, then I'm saying, okay, I may have done this, but I had to do it all the time so I can win that argument. But what's more important is she's really wounded because she's saying
Mhm.
always, and she's not getting better. So I have a responsibility, someone who loves her, to say, honey, what's going on?
Mhm.
And I heard you say always. Do you feel like that I'm always doing this? I mean, I said we can argue over the words, but what's going on? What can I do to make it feel better or to make this work better? What does that look like? And that's another thing I do for couples. If someone says they need security uh, or they're not being heard, and I say, well,
Mhm.
what does it mean to you? What does it look like to you to be heard?
Mhm.
And then I say, now you communicate that to him or her so they can hear that. 'Cause now you give them a target they can hit.
Mhm.
And so it's all about negotiations. Like you made a statement earlier, like I'm gonna have to wait 2 hours to talk to him. Then you say, well, okay, now I've heard you. I know you need time to process. How long do you think it's going to take you time to process? Is it going to be
Mhm.
an hour? Is it going to be two? based on it. And then that way, a couple things happen. One, the person wants to deal with it right away. It's not going to be dealt with right away, but they know they're not going to go 2 or 3 days to not resolve the
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah.
And what it also means too, that's really good for the couple, the person who needs to process has a chance to process. So when you come back to communicate, you're getting each other at your best, and the best way to resolve the issue. So it really becomes a win-win, because you
Yeah.
really don't want to have trying to work through conflict when one has not processed everything. Because it's going to come back up again because it's not totally resolved. So so even though it may take a little bit longer than people want, that's a really good way to handle it.
Got it. Like that. I like the idea of it's a negotiation. And I don't think I mean, we know what
It is.
negotiation looks like in business. We know what it looks like perhaps in the career space, but we don't think about negotiation in the context of relationship. And being able to negotiate allows me to get my need met. Like, okay, Joker, you're not off the hook on this. And it allows the other partner, see, y'all being really, really real. You're not off the hook. We gonna fix this.
I'm so scared. I'm so scared of you.
Which is ineffective because all it does is it's build a block, right? And so it allows one party to have the need of, we're going to have closure around this.
Exactly.
Because often for women, the challenge is there was no closure.
Yeah.
Like, just because the emotion blew off doesn't mean that I'm okay.
Right.
When you're no longer mad, at the beginning, you've blown off, blah, blah, blah. 2 days later, I'm simmering on something that's not resolved. And it's not even the issue anymore. It's the broken connection. Because for women, we're a lot about connection. And so if there's a stone wall or something like that, the connection is broken, and everything in us is about repairing the connection in our family. And so the woman's going to chase and chase and chase because it's the connection she's trying to break. And he's like, I'm not ready. Blah. And so you have this kind of stalemate. But the negotiation says, okay, if you need time, how much time do you need? But also, you're also accountable for then doing the processing and doing the work so that we can come back and build the connection. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and here's the deal, for a guy, when he said, I need time to process, if you keep talking and pushing that, then he's going to go away. And he's probably not going to talk about it. And the more you chase him, the more he's going to shut down.
Yep.
But if you say, hey, okay, well, hey, how long do you think you need to process this? And you say, okay, we agree with that. And then you come back together. And you say, and then even when you come back together, say, it's now a good time for us to talk. You said a couple of hours, I'm here, and say, yeah, well, or he might come back to you and say, I'm ready to talk, but you might be on a business deal. Say, hey, I'm on the phone right now, trying to close this deal. Hey, how about 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and I'll be ready to talk. And so you both, and I love that word. I use it all the time with couples, negotiate.
Yeah,
and you
I like
talk
that
to
a
each
lot.
other, but you give each other targets that they can hit.
Yeah.
And so if you want security, if you want respect, all those things are different for different people because we have different backgrounds. So what does respect look like for you? Well, I feel respected when boom, boom, this happens.
Yeah.
Feel safe and connected when this and this happens. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, I can hit that. But if I'm just going my mind what I think connected is, it might be totally different from yours. The other thing, when you bring back that connectedness, the male and female brains are wired differently.
Yeah.
Not all men, but a lot of men, we compartmentalize. So it's different when y'all have that super information highway kind of going all the way. So y'all
it's really integrated. It's very integrated.
Yeah. So it's all very holistic. So everything is connected to everything. So knowing that and talking about that, discussing that, that's really important. And that we've even encouraged couples, hey, more than likely you're going to have conflict. The goal of marriage is not to go conflict free. The goal is how you handle conflict. And so maybe you need to have some rules of engagement. I think in one of my books, I talk about just fighting fair. And in the context of fighting fair, for some people, we say, hey, so we're not going to raise our voice. We're going, wherever it is. And the two of you sit down, go out for coffee. You're not having conflict. And say, when we have conflict, for me, when this happens, it makes it hard for me to continue to talk, or I tend to shut down, or I tend to, and you talk to each other and it's like, oh, well, I didn't know that. Yeah. And I don't know, you realize, but sometimes when we're talking, you get really animated and you really get really, really loud. And sometimes, because with my dad, when he get really loud, it was not a good thing. So it's hard. And you just, whatever works for you guys, because you two are the experts on each other, and you
Yeah.
talk to each other, have a community and say, so can we have 4 or 5 rules of engagement before we have conflict? We do this. Some couples, they would just sit down, hold hands, face to face, knees to knees, and look at each other and say, hey, let's talk this out. And they come face to face. And when you're touching, that diffuses some of the emotion right there. And so it's just a real simple way. The touch is important. And then there's less chance you both getting animated as you work through the issues. I'm not saying you shouldn't have emotion, but I'm saying that sometimes our emotions can be excessive. And for one spouse, emotions can make someone not feel safe, if it's not handled correctly. So, but holding hands, looking at each other, and just really having a conversation and say, okay, I'm ready to talk. And when Brenda says we need to talk, that's not my fun thing to do, but I know on the other end is worth it.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing too in this conflict, I trust her. And so I know she has my best interest at heart. And so I know she might say things I don't want to hear, but need to hear, but she's on my team. And so once I knew she's on my team, it made it easier to hear criticism or constructive criticism. Not that I ever liked it, but I could process it, I trusted the source. So I think that comes to a lot of different things of building their friendship and helping her or helping him to become best friends.
Yeah.
So talking with conflict, I'm talking to my best friend.
Yeah. There's so much to unpack in what you said. And as folks are listening, I really appreciate the foundation of trust, right? So if you believe that the person that you're in conflict with has your best interest at heart always, then that allows you to be so much more receptive, whether it's to feedback, this or that or the other. But if we've done things in those relationships, on whatever side that erodes that trust, then in order to successfully navigate the conflict, perhaps the focus is on building the trust, or in parallel building the trust, so that certain elements of the conflict aren't just because of perception of being attacked or perception of being criticized or perception of being judged or what have you, because the trust is not there. But what I really like about this for women, for what you said, is that there is a communication that needs to happen, where you get to talk about, what does this look like for you? For women, men often talk about feeling respected. Women often, talk about feeling honored or cherished or some other version of that. I think it's incumbent upon us to be able to have the conversation. What does it look like for me to be cherished? Like, this is how that looks for me. So that then your partner has a blueprint and a target that they can hit. Because if I just say I don't feel honored, or I don't feel cherished, or I don't feel adored, or I don't feel appreciated, well, he's shooting, all over the place. Nope, that wasn't it. That wasn't it. So we then get to have empowerment around, this is what it looks like for me. Because how it looked like for the last woman might have been totally different in that relationship. And he was hitting, 10 out of 10 on her, but that's not how you're wired. So we have responsibility around that communication. And we also have, the parallels happen in the marketplace. Because again, the summit is about love and work. And how we do things in the love relationship can also mirror and match how we do things in the marketplace. And oftentimes women are not saying, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, this is the environment I want to be a part of, in the workplace. This is not like, so us really owning that, and taking responsibility for architecting some of the outcomes of what we want to see. I think that's really powerful. And negotiation is like the N word in another way for some people. But really being able to own that and get empowered with having a voice will eliminate so much of that conflict. I really like that.
Well, the communication is just really key. And again, remember, you're the expert on you. And men want to hit the target, but if you don't give them a target to hit, all they do have is from previous relationships and that's not you. And you need to be able to say, hey, I really appreciate your heart. And I appreciate you doing this for me. And, but that's not what makes me feel cherished. This is what makes me feel cherished. But I do appreciate your effort and thought.
Yeah.
Future, could you do this? And this way you're not kicking them, not putting them down.
Yeah.
Hey, you say you're stupid. You're saying, oh, I'm different. And they go, oh, and they had, okay, yeah, so I gotta learn her.
Yeah.
Kind of a joke we have is we gotta learn to speak woman one-on-one, because men and women use the same words. A lot of times they ain't speaking the same language. And so so she has to learn speaking man one-on-one, but I gotta learn speaking woman one-on-one. So and so you both have to work at it, and you both have to talk about it.
Yeah.
Sometimes Brenda, after we counsel, when we don't often do it, but sometimes when we counsel couples together and they leave, we'll say, hey, how are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
And so we can say stuff we need to work on, because we're always in the process of evaluating, hopefully getting better. But that's really important.
Yeah.
So
you made a point around when you were talking about rules of engagement, and you talked about, you have a conflict, and maybe after the conflict, you're having coffee or you're at dinner, whatever. It's outside of the moment. A mentor would often say there's inside the moment issues when, like, you're in the midst of conflict, and then there's outside the moment when things have simmered down. And so I gleaned from what you said that many of that kind of setting rules of engagement, or, this is what I like, don't like, are things to be able to share outside the moment when, when emotions are less heightened and so on, which makes sense, right?
yes.
The question becomes, I think, for some folks is, well, it has died down, and do I really want to stir up this pot again if the situation has died down? And so maybe the conflict is over, but
Wow.
whatever the issue is isn't necessarily resolved. So how do you think about rebroaching something, or, just saying, hey, I appreciate this, but I didn't, there's this fear of, am I going to create offense? Am I going to start another conflict? Things are good now. Like, do I really want to dust stuff up again?
Well, what you just said is that we haven't resolved the conflict. So, and then the other thing you said or implied is that it may not be safe. And so safe emotionally or whatever to have this conversation. So then the question comes out, what does resolving conflict look like for you?
Got
And
it.
so I think you have to, so then you have to have that conversation with each other. So for me, the conflict is resolved. Some people say, well, when we stop talking about it, it stops coming back up. But for others, what I'm hearing you say, some couples might think, well, if it's died down and we don't, but the issue's not resolved. But for me, I'm good if we're not having conflict. And so we have to look at conflict as a good thing, because it's going to make us better as a couple. But what's going to really make us better as a couple is that I wouldn't say brutally honest, but that we're completely honest and what we can handle. Now, if some things have to take time to be resolved, can we work on this big issue and get to a point where we can function, but we're not dead? It's not done yet. So can we again negotiate and come back a couple of days later, and can we finish it? And can we both be at peace that we both feel is resolved?
Yeah.
So both feel it's resolved. Then again, what does that mean for you? What's it mean for us? The big things that shouldn't keep coming back up again if it's really resolved. So, which doesn't mean we're not going to have conflict like something else, but let's do that. But I don't think I would try and do the rules of engagement. I mean, you could if you haven't resolved the issue, because then it's natural to go back into this, and it's natural to think he's trying to figure out how to win or she's trying to figure out how to win. But I would just simply say, it's easy for me to hear you when this happens. When you're saying this, it's a lot easier for me to hear you and respond. And I see somebody really cute behind you. It's fine. I had 3 of them. But so I think that's important, that you just kind of share 2 or 3 things. It's much easier for me to hear you and understand you and process what you're saying when this happens.
Yeah.
Or when this is not happening.
Yeah.
And again, you be the expert on you, but just kind of share non-conflict time.
Yeah.
Hey, this makes it easy for me to hear you in the midst of when we are having conflict.
Yeah.
Or this triggers me when we're having conflict.
and we've sat on this point for a while, but I think there's so much value in that for folks that are listening. And again, y'all are seeing crawl back forth all around. It is what it is. But I really want to hammer on this point because so much of it is about voice. So much of it is about having the courage to say, sweet pea, mommy's working. Do you want to come and say hello to everybody that's listening in? Come and say hello so then we can get it out your system. Come on. I do not have tape, baby. So this is my daughter. Aubrielle, say hello. Aubrielle is homesick today. She has a little bit of a stomach bug, so she is all in mommy's office today. So hi, everybody. All right. So I do not have tape. There is tape and glue in the kitchen. So why don't we go grab that? And then and then close the door and then I'll see you when I'm finished. Okay. I love you. Bye-bye. And so what I keep hearing, make sure to close the door, please, all the way. So what I keep hearing though is voice and agency and communicating. Now there's an appropriate time to communicate different elements. And I think the mistake that some of us make is that you think that in the heat of conflict is the time to start communicating all your needs, and that may not be effective. It may just, let's get through the conflict, first, and then have some agreement around when we revisit or whatever. But the wounds happen when we are not honest about the unmet need. And so then the next conflict happens and it piles on to a need that is still not being addressed, whether that need is the tone of voice or, whatever it might be. And so for ladies listening in, your voice is so important. And it's not just the voice of let me scream at the top of my lungs and assert myself, but it is you being in touch with what do I need here? Because sometimes we don't even know. You're offended or you are hurt, but you don't know exactly why. And so sometimes you're talking about the thing, but not getting to the root of what about this behavior, what about this tone, or what about this thing actually is triggering. And so knowing that about yourself to then be able to communicate, because if you're in a relationship where the person cares about you, the last thing they want to do purposely is to hurt you. And so if I know that I'm doing something that definitely hurts you, then I can adjust out of love. But if I don't know that, then I'm going to react in my natural way. And that reaction might be a much greater trigger than either person realizes. But that voice and that agency, and then having the courage to communicate that and the clarity with which you do it, that's what I'm gleaning from a lot of what you've shared just in this one question alone.
Well, our communication is really to make sure the other person can hear us and understand what we're saying. It's not a time to beat them up. It's not a time to dump truck. Because typically you're going to handle so much. And what we tell people, if one spouse talks too much, we have them say at the end of all that was for her, of all things you've said, what do we get out of this? Everything you brought up, what do you want me to get? And then, and I love the point that you become the expert on you, and you need to be fair. What are your triggers? Okay, he did this, this, or this, but then the real issue is, why does it bother you so bad?
Yeah.
And it's okay, but you need to know why, and you have to articulate to him why, so he can understand it. It's one thing to be upset. He can tell you upset, but why and what's his specific role in that? And then another thing, how do you think he can help in this process of resolving this issue? Because it's not just a me issue now, it's a us issue. Because we're talking about the health of the couple and of the relationship.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And so, and I liked the fact that you said early on that, it's not about winning in conflict. And if you win as the individual, you can very well lose. You lose as a couple.
Yeah.
And if we keep that in mind, again, there's maturity that comes and it comes to play. Because if I think I've got to win, I got to win, I bring that into the relationship, especially if I'm high achieving. A lot of women listening in, they're driven to win. They want to be the first X, the fastest Y, the youngest, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when you bring it into relationship, it can be highly detrimental, and it can leave us very lonely. The opposite of significance is connection, and the opposite of connection can be significant. So the more significant I want to be in this relationship, it could cost me the connection, which ultimately is the prize, right?
Right,
So
right.
as we start to kind of wind down the conversation, and you've given us so many strategies that are meaty, and literally, folks, if you just listen to the one or two that we've kind of anchored in on, I think there's just so much to unpack. But are there any other strategies top of mind that you think, when it comes to conflict with women and men, that you hear and you see just comes up all the time? Is there any other one or two strategies that you think this is where you guys work this out and things get better?
Well, I think we have to understand that listening is half of communication.
Mhm.
That's really important. To me, when Brenda and I have conflict, I hate having conflict, but the first thing that comes to my mind is that we're going to be better on the other side of this. And so that's really important. I think the other thing is, typically I'm ready to resolve the conflict quicker than she is,
Mhm.
which doesn't mean I'm better, doesn't mean I'm smarter, doesn't mean I'm more spiritual. It's just different, because she'll still need to process and go through emotional things that I'm not necessarily in tune with.
Mhm.
Uh, but I tend to be more emotional than she does. If you look at that, she is typically less emotional, but it depends on the nature of the conflict. So I think it's important. But if the conflict keeps coming up, and if you're dating and the same conflict keeps coming up, I really would see it as a caution flag to say, hey, I think we're stuck here.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of times people get stuck emotionally. As a person of faith, typically, if I want to get unstuck, I focus on the Bible and what it says,
Mhm.
but then I focus on the actions of what it says, because I believe God has given the best blueprint for marriage. And then once I change my actions, my emotions follow. But if I
Mhm.
never change how I think, that leads me to change my actions, then emotionally I stay stuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sometimes in conflict, we've attached emotion to the issue as opposed to being more logical, and that could be a man or a woman.
Mhm.
Uh, Once we attach that emotion to it, then it becomes very personal,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that can become. And then we feel like if I give this up, then I'm losing, and
Mhm.
we're missing the boat, as
Mhm.
opposed to saying, you know, I think he's got a problem with this. How can I best communicate that to him? When's a good time to do that?
Yeah.
And then how can I say it in a way it's for his best interest? I'm not putting him down, or I'm not
Mhm.
putting her down. So I think if we have that maturity, that humility, and we're
Yeah.
really trying to serve our spouse, because we can see their flaws before they can a lot of times. So it's all in that approach. But my approach is all found my foundation is that I love my significant other, or I love my spouse. I'm trying to help her be better. That's
Yeah.
what she's trying to do for me. And so
Yeah.
it's not about keeping score. It's not about trying to be more intelligent. It's that I really want to have a great relationship. We've had some great times. I want to continue for us to have those kind of great times.
Yeah.
And so don't avoid conflict. But what has happened over our almost 38 years, we have less conflict, but we still do have conflict.
Like,
So, I think the other thing is that we're both always growing and learning in our relationships. And we do marriage conferences. Sometimes we have 2,000 people show up, but we'll have couples who've been married 59, 60 years. And what what they're saying is that you always keep learning in a deep relationship or in a marriage relationship.
yeah. Yeah. I love it. One thing you said early on, well, first I'll say, for those who are in the selection process, so you're single, you're dating, you have the privilege of selecting, a long-term partner. That emotional maturity is very important, because if
Huge.
you have emotional maturity, you can navigate through anything together. You can navigate through conflict, you can navigate through life's challenges that are certain to come, you can navigate through partnering in the household and all of that. So if the emotional maturity is not there, you run for the hills. Like, you gotta figure that out. But you mentioned early on about learning your partner.
Yeah.
And conflict is an opportunity to learn something about the other person. We
Yeah.
tend to take conflict so personally, either because of our own wounds or what this says about me, or what I think this that you think this says about me, like all those kind of things, right? We take it so personally that we don't realize that people react for reasons. They say things for it's their reasons. Might be right, might be wrong, might be somewhere in between, but everyone does things for reasons. They stonewall for reasons. They come out of a bag for reasons. And so the conflict becomes an opportunity if we are mature enough to be curious about it, as opposed to, get in our emotions and be personal about it. And again, we're humans, but when you can be curious and be like, what does this say about my partner? What does this
Yeah.
say about what am I seeing? What am I learning about him that I didn't know before? What am I learning about her that I didn't know before? Because she's revealing a part of herself, a part of the need, a part of something, a wound, a part of something. And how can I support through that? Again, it's not easy to do in the moment. But if we can elevate to that level of love, because that's a love that goes beyond, I'm feeling you right now. It goes beyond, go serve you. There really is gem in that. And there really is gem in that. And
Well,
so,
the other thing too, real quickly, is that not only you learn about them, where you learn about yourself.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's huge. And if they're dating, one of the key things in dating would be to ask them about what's their relationship with their dad. What's
Uh-huh.
their relationship with their
So
mom? That would tell them
yes,
a lot. That would be
yeah,
huge. And what they say about them is something you need to really pay attention to, because that's
great.
yeah. So those are things that are really important if you're in a dating relationship. That I think you really need to ask those questions. And I have a singles book called Single and Free to Be Me. If you're not in a relationship, or you want to be, or if you're in the middle of one, there's some really good things about how to have a long lasting relationship. So I would encourage you for that. And then my marriage book is Keep Your Wife Your Best Friend, but it's woman approved, so women can read it as well as their spouses or
Oh,
boyfriends, and they
say it again. Keep your wife your
keep,
best
keep,
friend.
keep, keeping your wife your best friend.
Okay.
And that with both books, there are chapters at the end of every chapter, so you can process and evaluate what you read and see where you are, why you're where you are, and then where you want to go from there. So there are some tips about having conversations with your spouse if you're dealing with a man. So they may be helpful to you.
Got it. So Dr. Shuler has already talked about free stuff that you're able to access. We have a specific link that folks who are listening in will be able to access so much of his great content. So is it a link just to your website? Is it a link to a specific deliverable? Tell us what folks have.
It's a link to my website on the
Okay.
homepage. Go to my homepage and you click on common mistakes most couples make. And we've had great success with people who are single, not even dating, go through that. That one young lady said she went through that. She found this guy. They went through it together. It really helped them. And it's for married couples too. So, but it's 13 free videos. Did I say free? 13 free videos
You said
that,
free.
that deal with a bunch of topics that we didn't even talk about. We talk about conflict, but we also talk about forgiveness. We talk about how to communicate more effectively. So they're just how to work through stuff, and it helps you better understand females, and also it helps you better understand males.
Okay.
So again, there are 13 free videos called Common Mistakes Most Couples Make. Go to my
Take
website.
advantage. Take it in. We'll put the link at the bottom. The link is at the bottom of this interview. Conflict is so critical. It's so huge. It affects so much of how we show up on any given day. Your mind is occupied when there's something unresolved in your love relationship. It impacts your ability to show up in the marketplace. It impacts your creativity. It impacts your health. It impacts your stress level. It has so many ramifications. And so if there was one area to master, it would be how to master this successfully. There's so much pain associated with that. So when somebody gives you great content for free, you don't do it for free. Go, but free does not mean without effort. And so take the gift of the wisdom and be committed to the application of it, both as you select your life partner and as you continue to nurture the relationship that you have. And so I just thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, your just relatability, and how easy it is to, to just connect with you, your warmth and sincerity and all of that that just comes through. We appreciate you. And on behalf of Dr. Shuler and myself, I just wanted to bless you all. Hopefully, this has been a really welcome conversation, and we want to wish you all well. So we'll see you next time. Bye bye.